We're going to talk this morning with Dan Crenshaw, Congressman, of course, and Tim Kennedy regarding all of this.
He was on the ground helping get people out.
A crowd of hundreds immediately vanished in front of me, and my body was catastrophically wounded. My abdomen had been ripped open, every inch of my exposed body, except for my face, took ball bearings and shrapnel. I tried to get up, but could not. Laying there for a few minutes, I started to lose consciousness when I heard Chaz, my team leader, screaming my name as he ran to me. His voice calling to me kept me awake. The withdrawal was a catastrophe, in my opinion, and there was an inexcusable lack of accountability.
And that remains. What probably is the worst part about it, it took people, retired military men and women, a lot of times using money out of their own 401ks and their own pensions in order to go over there and finance the exit of Americans and their Afghans and their allies, as well as watching that horrible withdrawal. And the President of the United States would say, look how many people we got out. Well, look how many people you left behind, and look who you left behind to do it. People like Tim Kennedy, an Army sniper and co-founder of Save Our Allies. He served in Afghanistan and helped evacuate nearly 10,000 people from Afghanistan, was on the ground that day. Hey, Tim, how important was testimony like that yesterday?
I mean, it was heartbreaking. It's unfortunate we have 13 service members that can't tell their stories. You know, a few hours before that, Nicole Gee, I was with her as we were searching women that we were bringing onto the base during the evacuation. She volunteered to come and search some of the people that we were bringing on to the base in an effort to save their life. And then that afternoon, she gets blown up in an IED. The men and women that were on the ground, the service members there that were, acts of heroism everywhere that you looked. These service members, the 82nd, the Marines on the ground, doing things that are indescribable and seeing things that we would never wish upon our worst enemy. It's unforgivable, the lack of tools and resources that we gave them for this evacuation, and chaotic and catastrophic. Can't even begin to describe what it looked like on the ground.
You know, Tim, 13 Americans died in that blast. A lot of Afghans died in that blast. Children were screaming. Moms were carrying their babies around, their dead babies around in their arms. And we heard a lot of that yesterday in the testimony. What went through your mind when you heard Sergeant Vargas Andrews talk about, because you were a sniper in the Army, talk about being in that tower with his team leader, who was a sniper, ready to shoot that suicide bomber, and they could not get the AOK. The battalion commander came in. He said, I don't know. They said, well, then who can give us the AOK? We know this guy is the man that we need to shoot. And they never got the AOK. And then that guy, eventually 13 Americans and many more died. What goes through your mind? What was happening in that tower? And how can we improve the rules of engagement rules?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the authorities and authorizations that should have been available for our service members to do their jobs were not. The Department of State were the ones that were running this NEO operation, this non-combatant evacuation operation. And Department of State should never run a military operation. Ever. It never goes well. And anytime that you have a politician trying to dictate what warfighters are going to do on the ground, this is going to be the byproduct. We're going to see young men and women die, and we're going to continue to lose wars. They just disbanded the Scout Snipers, and this is a perfect example of why they are so important. This could have saved Americans' lives. This could have saved the people that we're evacuating. You know, it's absolutely the fault of the government and Department of State for things like this happening and for us to continue to lose these wars.
Indeed. Earlier on Fox and Friends First here on the Fox News Channel, we had some Gold Star mothers talk a little bit about what they saw yesterday. Tim, listen to this.
I actually got really emotional while I was hearing the testimony, and ended up becoming even more upset when I realized that the whole thing could have been prevented.
A very alarming thing to hear that individuals and organizations were the ones who have stepped up in the past 19 months to see that we are still retrieving Americans and still retrieving individual Afghan friendlies from danger right now. It is a great alarm to me that our government has put any pushback against us trying to help those who are still left behind. It also is a great deal of joy for me to hear finally our children are getting justice on Capitol Hill.
You know, Tim, What we heard from the first woman in that soundbite montage was she said, essentially, it didn't have to happen like this. And it didn't.
No, it absolutely didn't. You know, a NEO operation, we've done lots of them. When the military runs them, they go well. When you put politics and you put policymakers, their ability to make decisions on the ground for war fighters, this is what happens. You know, you always want to give the authority and the powers down to the lowest level so they can make with the ground truth is the most important truth. The men and women on the ground have the ground truth. But if you don't allow them to make those decisions, we will continue to see Americans dying and dying and dying and dying. It was absolutely preventable. You know, we are still in the Save Our Allies, our organization. We are still trying to evacuate people out of Afghanistan. We still have people in safe houses all over the world. This is far from over, you know, let alone the guilt and the remorse of having to deal with losing Americans on the ground that day because of failed policy and because we took the authorities and the authorizations away from ground force commanders. You know, when are we going to learn that this is not how we fight? This is not how we win wars. This is how we continue to lose them.
Absolutely. And Tim, a couple of things. You also helped get Benjamin Hall out. It's going to be our guest tomorrow. Save Our Allies, helping in Ukraine. So you never stop. It's too bad we have to use great organizations like yours, and we can't use official organizations that we pay tax dollars for, and there doesn't seem to be a willingness. Is it okay with you that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and former General, now Secretary of Defense Austin, say, I was just following orders, I was told to get people out, and that's what I did, essentially alleviating themselves from responsibility? How does that sit with you?
I mean, I couldn't sit in that seat for a day. It's the hardest job in the world, but both those Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you know, when Americans die because of failed policy, and we had Americans die because of failed policy, you know, we had 20 years at war, and that country is worse off than it was when we got there. These are policy and politician problems. These are not warfighter problems. So, you know, it's easy to place blame on the military, but if you take a step back and objectively look at what really happened over the course of these 20 years, it led up to a failed event, which was evacuation.
Nobody's blaming the military. I want to be clear. They said they were doing what the president wanted them to do, and they told the president this could happen. But instead of putting their stars on the ground and saying, if you do this, people will die, and this will be a disaster, and we'll lose this war, he went ahead and did it, and essentially said, wasn't my call. Is that okay with you?
Man, you know, like, I have personally been in situations where if I quit, if I left because I had a tough decision, they'd replace me with somebody less capable to do the job and have to make those choices. So I'm not going to walk away from having to make tough decisions. I'm going to sit there and want to advise. In that position, they are advisors. You know, in some of the positions that I've been, I was an advisor, but I'm not going to walk away. I'm not going to be like, let somebody else come in here and make even worse decisions. I'm going to continue the fights, the battles that I can have effect to win. And I mean, those are really tough decisions. Do I just quit and let somebody else come in? Maybe a yes man that's going to do whatever the president wants? We have a chain of command for a reason, and we have to follow that chain of command. That chain of command goes all the way to the president. And in this instant, the president was relegating decision authority to the Department of State. And the Department of State is where all of these failed decisions and policies were implemented on the ground.
But ultimately, Joe Biden did admit the buck stops with him.
Yeah, and both of those moms in that interview on Fox and Friends First said the administration needs to change.
Yeah, he got a pass on it.
Tim, thank you very much for your service, for what you're doing. And once again, if people would like to help you, the website, once again, is saveourallies.org.
Yeah, please help. There's so many, and there are 80% of Afghans who stood by us at great risk to themselves and their families remain left behind. That's according to someone else who also works with you getting people out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, they're using their own money.
Give Benjamin Hall a big hug for me. I love that guy. What a hero.
Well, you helped save his life. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much,
You're
Tim.
the hero, too. Thank you.